welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
Here we are today proclaiming the amazing truth that has shaped our entire world, and we're going to get into some more of that in just a moment. I am discovering, obviously this whole podcast is devoted toward the truth and the transformational truth of a Christian worldview, but I think this book that we're reading right now is really helping me even appreciate the impact of a Christian worldview at a deeper level. We can talk about the impact of the Bible on government. We talk about the impact of the Bible on freedom. The impact of the Bible on a myriad of things. But especially today, as we get into this topic of literature and how you cannot really understand even the flow of Western Civ or Western Lit without having a thorough understanding of the Scriptures. And so again, I guess I just pause here momentarily before I admire the fact of how color coordinated we are today. Don't we look, those of you watching, just admit it, some days, we're not the best looking as far as coordination, but today, I just appreciate the fact we have hired a new staff member who's dedicated just to helping us.
A wardrobe? No, we had not.
A wardrobe coordinator.
For those who are wondering where our budget goes.
All right, that was a lie. That was a lie, but
no.
It looks as if we have somebody
So here's the deal. I have about 4 shirts, so there's always a 25% chance I'm going to wear this shirt.
All right.
So,
well, I nailed it.
Yeah, if you wear green every day or blue, whatever, every podcast, there's a 25% chance that we're going to match.
That's good to know because I'll keep that in mind. Now, the challenge I have, this is not a joke. This is painful.
Sure.
My spring wardrobe tub, all of my wardrobe fits in that tub for spring. It's gone. We can't find it anywhere. I have scoured my house, and that's my whole wardrobe.
Now, you do have, basically, traveler pilgrims coming in your house every day. So it's very easy if someone just
wants... It might be in Colorado. I'm wondering if my son...
It sounds like probably one of the dogs just kind of yanked it with it as it's on the way back to Colorado.
This is traumatic, seriously, because the weather is changing.
I think the Lord's trying to tell you something. Buy some new clothes.
I'm receiving offerings to fund that new clothes wardrobe if you want to write me a check.
Expand beyond my little 4.
No, this has been a prayer request. So on future podcasts, I'm going to be saying, hey, the Lord has come through.
Yeah, the Lord come through.
You'll never believe.
Special offering to Pastor Ron's wardrobe. Because someone stole all his clothes.
Yeah, so I'm hanging on the Sunday wardrobe, but pretty soon I can't be wearing flannels.
Keep it cold. Because I got no short sleeves left. No, but anyway, speaking of this book, I feel like it's so powerful for me. It's, the last thing that fish notices is water. That's what kind of people say it like.
Right, because it's his atmosphere. It's all he knows.
That's all he knows. It's ubiquitous. And as we study Christian worldview, I have a degree of understanding and appreciation for the world that's been created by biblical culture, growing up with the church and all that stuff, overtly Christian stuff. But again, seeing through an Eastern perspective and an intellectual Eastern perspective, more and more just like, wow, I don't even understand some of these basic foundations of everything, of every goodness and infrastructure. Again, even the things that's used right now, the foundation of things that's used right now to attack Christians came from the Bible.
Right. They're using our worldview to attack our worldview.
Absolutely. And again, this is one of those things that's, at one point, it's amazing. You're like, with the awesome world we live in, that we have cars and we have structure. We don't have to worry about, people killing us every day. Like this beautiful society we have doesn't happen by accident. It did not happen by accident. It's a unique expression come through the biblical worldview. But the scary part is we keep tearing it down piece by piece, thinking that, it'll be fine. These are just the patriarchy, or this is just the evil of the Bible and blah, blah. You start tearing it down more and more. The unintended consequences, because we have no clue, because we're ignorant to the infrastructure, will destroy society one day.
Absolutely. We'll get into it on our next podcast, the whole impact on education in general. But what concerns me is we've got our state universities. And somebody did a study on this. They're like 90-some% led by liberals. So there's no balance at all in the teaching of these important truths. So you're getting a skewed, one side, liberal, God-hating, Bible-hating, Western Civ hating, perspective that, as you said, really poisons the minds of our students because there's no critical thinking. There's no balanced teaching in most of our universities. In fact, if you come out in support of Western Civ and Scripture, you might be looking at finding a new job somewhere else because of the cancel culture that we've talked about. So that's what concerns me is long term. If we don't start recovering some of the truths we're talking about today in higher education, it won't be long before the people seeking to lead us are absolute pagans who have no understanding or no appreciation for the world in which we live, which Pastor Andrew was alluding to this book that we're talking about. It's called The Book That Made Your World, how the Bible created the soul of Western civilization. And right now our soul is under attack. Our soul is rotting, not because we don't know the truth or have the truth, it's because we don't go back and teach the truth. The truth is available for us. Yeah. And so we get into the topic today, literature. Why did pilgrims build nations? And he starts off by making a really strong statement. No one can understand English lit. Now that's a broad spectrum, like English lit, right? If you've been to college, there's coursework called English lit, and it gives you a survey of all the great works. But he's making a profound truth. You cannot understand English lit without first reading the Bible. That's a big statement. And then he goes on in this chapter to try to back that up. Why is that the case, and why is the Bible so important?
So the basis he's trying to make is just like the Bible's foundational in ways that we don't even notice anymore, in technology, in language, in the culture that we have, in the innovation we have. Those are so, the impact of Bible is so foundational and so, I guess, archaic. Not that it's outdated, but it's just, we don't teach it anymore. The same way it has that type of impact on literature in a way that we don't even notice anymore.
Right, the figures of speech, the themes of the Bible, all of these things find themselves embedded in English lit that followed.
The greatest stories, the greatest literature, the greatest books that inspire people to change came from the Bible.
Yes, and so he gives a great example, for instance, on just a fundamental way in which the Bible is different. He says, when you read the Bible, he says it has a ring of truth.
Yeah.
In other words, you compare it with Greek and Roman literature, or like, say, Homer and the Odyssey, Iliad, these types of this was the ancient lit that I remember being introduced to in college. He says that the characters in these epic works, right, have a ring of like modern day superheroes. There's something about them that we over glorify certain strengths, or we make them in such a way that they become almost unrelatable. And yet he compares that, for instance, with the biblical characters like Abraham, for instance. Moses is attributed with the writings of the Pentateuch, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And yet Moses came years after them. So in other words, this was oral tradition, handed down. And what you would expect to get is a character who has been cleaned up over the years or embellished over the years, given some steroids, right? Yeah. Some superhuman steroids. And yet when you encounter Abraham, for instance, there's nothing, in other words, the focus of the Bible is not on blowing up the character of Abraham into some superhuman, unrelatable kind of man. He's very relatable. In fact, the phrase he uses is the Bible's characters have feet of clay. So Abraham, we run into Abraham and Sarah, and they're like beyond the age of childbirth. And God starts promising that they're going to be, he's going to be the father of many nations and have seed that will be more than the sand on the ground. And you're looking at this guy going, wait a minute, he's weak. And he talks about Abraham and Isaac. They both lie about their wives because their wives are beautiful, and they're afraid their wives are going to be taken into some wicked king's harem, right? And so they're not these super strong, like, touch my wife and I'll make you pay, Arnold Schwarzenegger characters. Right. They're weak. And they're liars, and they're afraid, and they're very much people that we identify with, not the people we put on a pedestal. We go, no, Abraham, how come you lied about your wife? Isaac, you did the same thing. Why aren't you more courageous?
Right.
I mean, it's just a ring of truth that the Bible has that other books just don't have.
And there's another powerful element right now. If you follow movies and cinemas like I do, the one thing that critics talk about all the time is that there is either a powerful story arc or there's no story arc. It's a bunch of flashy picture. And what that means, the hero went through a journey and learned something and grew in a certain way. They didn't just beat the bad guys. That's not compelling enough. But there's an internal conflict. There's a growth and there's a journey. Well, you look at these Greek heroes or these legendary mythical heroes. I mean, they were just either really cunning or really smart or really strong. But if you look at these biblical patriarchs, look at the journey of Jacob, right? The arc that he went through from a liar.
Even that theme of journey that the Bible establishes so powerfully. It's a theme that Western literature has taken on. We all love a good journey. Yeah. The one that I happen to enjoy, of course, is The Lord of the Rings. What an epic journey.
A literal journey.
Yeah, from a little hobbit to to Mordor, where he's destroying evil. I mean, and that again, that of course was inspired by the Bible. It's the simple little hobbit, a normal human being with feet of clay, large hairy feet like hobbits have, who is on a supernatural, impossible journey to defeat evil. Well, where did these ideas come from? They come straight from the Bible. Right. You look at Abraham; he's told to go to another country, leave his family, leave everything familiar, and God will make a great nation out of him. In other words, he has to go somewhere. He has to leave. He has to be moving. He has to follow God. He has to listen to the voice of God. He has to obey. Yeah. But over and over again, the Bible shows us that extraordinary things happen in the lives of very simple, very relatable people like you and me.
I mean, Moses is one of probably the most powerful depicted journey. In fact, that he was a prince, he was living privileged, but he identified with his people. But then he had anger issues, he killed somebody, and then when God encountered him at 80 years old, he was a reluctant hero. And I thought that archetype of the reluctant hero was very interesting because he didn't want to do this.
Right.
But through his journey, he grew in confidence, he grew in faith, he achieved great things for God.
Moses was full of excuses, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He knew all the reasons. He knew who he was and who he wasn't. Yep. And he said, I can't talk. And God said, I'll send you, Moses and Aaron, he'll help you. He'll be your voice, But that idea of reluctant hero, that appeals to us. Like one of my favorite movies is The Patriot. I can't think of a more reluctant hero. He's basically saying, look, been there, done that.
He literally was like, I'm not doing that. I'm staying out of this.
Yeah, and in fact, his son ridiculed him and called him basically a coward for not stepping up to fight. And so he was like, no, I care about my family. I've been in war before. Nobody should rush into war. I mean, like he's like, no, it doesn't matter what you say. I need to be here. I need to be at home. I need to be a dad. I need to be here for my kids. I mean, it is the quintessential epic of the reluctant hero, and the Bible again is full of folks like this who simply how about David? Is there not a cause? It wasn't like he's trying to be somebody. His focus was on God. His focus was on the challenge at hand.
Or Gideon.
Yeah.
I mean, who am I? Great and mighty warrior. He's there hiding. He's hiding in the middle of the day thrashing wheat because he's the one you want to see. I just recently saw, we were just talking about Top Gun Maverick. One of the biggest grossing movie. And it was just a good old-fashioned story, redeeming arc. Nothing like, no agenda pushed on me. And again, what was so interesting about this character that made billions of dollars? It was a reluctant hero who has flaws, who made mistakes. Yep. And he didn't really want to do it. I can't do it. But because of the people he loves, because the call on his life, he says, you know what, I got to enter into that. That inspires so many people. Yep. Where did that come from? It comes from the Bible.
Well, and in some way, I'm just thinking about this, Jesus as the reluctant hero, Obviously, he understood that there was an assignment that only he could fulfill, a mission. Yep. And I think when he's in the garden, and he's saying, Lord, if at all possible, can you take this cup from me? In other words, if it's possible to abort the mission, let's do it. And yet he says, nevertheless, of course, not my will, but your will be done. What a picture, again, of a suffering servant, not seeking his own strength or glory. In fact, emptying himself, right, of all his godly superpowers, so to speak, right? Taking on human flesh in the incarnation, coming humbly to take our place. That whole idea of sacrifice too, not only the reluctant hero, but the biblical theme of sacrifice that runs through so much, even Shakespeare and some of those folks that use that powerful theme of the sacrificial leader, the one who lays down his life or his agenda or his dreams, for other people.
Yeah.
What was that Bruce Willis movie where he basically lays down his life to save the planet, right? I'm not.
Oh, Armageddon.
Armageddon, Again, anytime there is sacrifice in a movie where the star, the hero that you've come to love, all of a sudden the twist is he willingly gives
Gladiator.
his own. Well, how about the late, even in the, I'm not a big Marvel guy or whatever.
Yeah.
But
at the very end, Tony Stark, Iron Man killed him.
Iron Man.
Yeah. Spoiler alert for those who haven't seen the movie 5 years ago.
That would be
That's
me.
on you. Yeah.
But anyway, like where does this idea of the sacrificial hero even come from? Ideas have consequences, and ideas come from somewhere.
Right.
And the point that we're making today is that a lot of these incredible themes that shape our culture.
Right.
Like the Greeks wouldn't celebrate a sacrificial hero. It was all about power, right? That's why the gospel, the Bible says, is a stumbling block, because how do you have a savior who's not, Messiah, who's not a conqueror? And yet Jesus did conquer, but he didn't conquer in the way that they expected. And so, to the Jews, it's offensive, and to the Greeks, it's like, what? That's your hero nailed to a cross, beaten beyond recognition.
I think the other issue is that I just lost my mind.
Wait,
sorry,
where'd it go?
Conquering hero. We're talking about conquering hero. We're talking about
sacrificial
hero
journeys.
I just thought I lost my mind. Sorry,
No
I have another
problem.
point to make. Is the Bible is not just to entertain us,
Right.
because all these Greek heroes. Oh, I know. I was gonna say. Okay, I'll come back to this point. In the Greek worldview, there's no good and evil.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember studying Greek myths in Latin class, 4 years Latin class. I know more myths than I can count. I read all these. I had to, And there is no clear good and evil. I think even as we kind of made some of these Greek stories into like our Western Civ movies, we almost add a Christian idea of good and evil to those movies.
Right.
But in the original Greek stories and mythology, or Roman mythologies, like Zeus is terrible.
Right.
From the Western Civ perspective, from the biblical perspective, he's terrible. But he's the God. He's the God of all gods, right? So, like, who dictates what's good and who's bad? And that's just
they're capricious. You don't know whether they're good today, bad today.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether you personally are good or bad, because they do bad things to good people and they do bad things to bad people. It's like, so why try? If those are the gods you're trying to please, then you're just trying to survive and take the easiest way out, and even take the path of compromise if necessary, because you just don't want Zeus to be messing with you.
That's all it is, right?
I mean, but you can't make sense out of a world like that. There's no predictability, So when you come to the Bible, you have themes like good and evil. Like God is a good God. He is a God who punishes evil. He is a God who rewards the righteous. In other words, there's like a set of rules which help us make sense out of our world. Whereas when you're living in the Greek and Roman world, there's no sense in your world. It's just, like you say, you don't know what to expect from these gods, because they're evil and wicked all mixed together.
What cause is there to die for when the cause that got, like Hercules, he was sent to the 12 labors to redeem his thing. But then because of his flaw that I think he like killed his wife or daughter accidentally, or whatever. But he killed them because he got like hypnotized by some other gods, and it's just like there's no like. Was it really his fault? And as he redeemed these tasks, he's doing it for another wicked god, and there's no cause to lay your life down for. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
When there's no good and evil, clarity of good and evil, and there's not transcendent cause, why should we sacrifice?
Yes.
And
the reality of our world is there is evil, so you have to make sense out of it. I mean, you don't have to have whether or not the Greeks or Romans helped us understand it. The point is, every human being encounters evil. There is injustice in the world.
Yeah.
And we don't need some philosopher to explain it to us. It's like that was wrong. That hurts. That's wicked. Why did you do that? I mean, that's the justice and understanding of justice and injustice is built in us as creatures made in the image and likeness of God. So when you come to the Bible, this is another thing I love about the Bible. It's not sugar-coated. There is ugly stuff. I remember when we did the series on shame and we started off with the rape of Tamar. The Bible includes the worst of the human condition.
Yeah.
And sometimes you read it and you're
about the king's daughter, about the king.
Yes.
It's not some common person. It's
exactly.
like the David,
Yeah. And so you see evil up close and personal. But the Bible gives us an understanding of where it came from, why it's here, and where everything's going. It gives us a theme of redemption, for instance, that even if you started off evil, you don't have to end up evil.
Yeah.
And again, you look at the Hindu worldview, it's all about karma. It's all about a caste system. It's about stay in your lane.
Yep.
It's about, you're not going to ever rise above who you are, who the gods have destined you to be, fatalism. But you encounter the Bible, and you see somebody, for instance, like Jacob, who was a liar and a conniver and a wicked man, a selfish man. And yet he encounters the Lord. He wrestles with God. God breaks him. God changes his name. God changed it, which was significant of changing a person's character. And the Jacob you first encounter is not how the Jacob that you end up with. Yeah. And so the Bible is a book of hope. It says, look, if you've made mistakes, if you've been an evil, selfish person, if you've done things you're ashamed of, you don't have to stay that way. Yeah. And to me, some of the greatest stories that we go and we watch and we read are stories of transformation. It's stories that says, this is who a person was, but this is how they ended up. It's stories of family redemption, marital redemption, personal redemption. Maybe the person was an alcoholic or a criminal or took somebody's life. But you look at the process of the grace of God on their life. That's another big theme in Western literature, grace. And you look at the power of grace, the power of forgiveness, and you see that a person does not have to stay who they were. And that's inspiring to us because every one of us has faults and foibles that we wish we didn't have and things about ourselves that we don't like and decisions or choices we made in our youth, that we wish we could go back and do over. And yet the Bible is so full of hope for people. Yeah. Like you don't have to be stuck. And so when it comes to the subtitle of this chapter, why did Pilgrims build nations? The fact is there was no nation building stuff in the minds of other cultures because, again, fatalism said you were stuck. There's no good or evil, or all there is good and evil, but we don't know how it all works out. There's no sense of justice. We don't know how to deal with the problem of evil. Yep. How do we deal with the problem of human nature? Human beings are so selfish. Is there really any hope that we can bring about societal transformation? And again, the point of this is the Bible provides the worldview for all of this kind of stuff and really leads to, I think as the author said, Western writers anchored themselves to the truth in the Bible. And once they anchored themselves, they were able to fly into all different, visions of a better future. But their feet were standing on a solid rock because the Bible claimed to be truth. Yeah. And it was truth that provided the basis for then engaging in the world around us.
Can I read this quote right
Absolutely.
Here? Far from seeking, like Homer, merely to make us forget our own reality for a few hours.
Yeah.
The Bible, seeks to overcome our reality. We are to fit our own life into its world, feel ourselves to be elements in this structure of universal history.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the difference between like watching a Office or some sitcom just to entertain you,
right,
versus, like I mentioned, watching Saving Private Ryan. And even though I don't live in World War II right now, I'm not a soldier in World War II. The timeless truth, the impact, the stories are so convicting, so inspiring that it's powerful enough to not just change me personally, but to change nations and change infrastructure and change governments, to birth new nations. That's the power of the literature of the Bible.
Yes, and perfect example. I got kind of a funny story. I took my wife away on a romantic getaway, and we came up with this great idea. We thought that while we were away, we would watch a movie we had wanted to watch for a long time, Saving Private Ryan. Oh my gosh!
Oh, the Getaway.
Not a romantic chick flick, as you guys all know. And we're sitting there watching.
You never seen that before? That was the first time.
That was the first time.
Oh my goodness!
And the first 10 minutes of that movie, or 15 minutes, you're just absolutely stunned because you're thrown right in the middle of Normandy, right? Normandy Beach, and you're just watching the slaughter of American lives, young men. On that beach going after, Hitler's Nazi war machine. And, it's gruesome, it's graphic, it's real, it's about as real as any kind of war movie could depict. And, it just stuns your senses because you realize that this, again, the themes we just talked about, good versus evil, willingness to lay your life down for a cause that matters. I mean, secularism provides none of this, as we'll get to in just a moment. There's no basis for sacrifice for anything. Life is meaningless. Why give your life for anyone or anything? But then you go to Saving Private Ryan and you realize this was, as Tom Brokaw mentioned in his book, the greatest generation. I mean, these were 18-year-olds who were coming off those boats and charging, head on into just the most demonic, wicked, hideous evil that planet Earth, was experiencing at the time with Hitler. And again, you're stunned, you're inspired, you're nauseated by just evil, bloodshed, and yet you're inspired to realize that you come away going, you know what, there's things worth fighting for. And so, but I don't recommend that for a romantic getaway. I chalk that up for...
If you're trying to wind down, relax. I think I forgot where I watched it, and I was not prepared for it. It wasn't just the beginning. You think the beginning is like, okay, the worst part is over. Oh, the ending. Jeez,
yeah. But it's war. And I think, to your point, other writings try to help you escape. The Bible puts you right in the middle of real life and gives you, and here's, I guess, the thing, it gets back to the journey. The Bible is a message of redemption from beginning to end. It explains where evil comes from. And to go back to our biblical worldview, every worldview should be able to answer four inescapable questions, right? Origins, how we got here. Meaning, what's the point of it all? Morality, what is right and what is wrong? And then destiny, where is this going? And again, worldviews that are cyclical, Hindu worldviews, Buddhist worldviews, they don't answer those questions effectively. What Christianity does, we know where we started, we know where the problem came from, we know the meaning of life, we understand morality. The Bible clearly says this is good and this is evil. And then it gives us the blessed hope, as we call it, the kingdom of God. We're moving, and I've been preaching on this, but we're moving toward the climax of human history with Christ's return. And so it gives us hope. And so even in the midst of the pain and suffering of life, we still have hope because it's not meaningless, and we know history is moving somewhere. Where did those ideas come from? They're biblical ideas. Those are biblical truths that are immersed. They are built into the psyche of what it means to be an American. And if we lose the Bible, we lose these great truths. Which is why, when we go overseas, Americans are known for being visionaries. We're known for being people who are proactive, problem solvers, whereas certain Eastern cultures are not wired that way at all. And you're like, well, why don't you think this way? How come there's no paradigm in your brain for being proactive? And it's because their worldview completely, there's no room for that. You're just a victim. It's a fatalistic worldview. It doesn't matter what you do. You're a victim of a system. And I see that happening as we lose the Christian worldview in America. There is a victimization that is coming over our culture, where people are, you're a part of systemic this or systemic that. It's not your fault. You can't really change anything. And it shows you how far we've gotten from the worldview of the Bible.
Western Civ is the fruit. That's I think it's a good way. The fruit, the consequences of the Bible is the downstream of not just the Catholic Church version of the Bible, in which only the priests have it, but when the Bible's democratized,
yeah. Like we talked about last podcast.
like we talked before, Western civ is a result of that. And is Western European nations, whatever, always great? No, there's corruptions and everything. But the overall innovation and growth, I think the best example comes to mind is, and I grew up in Taipei, Asia. Taiwan, Taipei has a degree of Western influence, a lot of Christians, but still it's in the East. I grew up my dad was a pastor, but he also taught in the seminary. So I lived in the seminary. I grew up literally in the seminary, in like dormitories.
Yep.
And one day, and there was teachers from the West, from America, to come and teach. And one day, my parents took me to one of the houses or dormitories or whatever, like staff housing for one of these missionaries or teachers from America. And I remember, because that's all I knew. All I knew was just Taiwan stuff. I remember walking into this teacher's house. I still remember that. And it felt amazing. There was carpets. It was decorated. It was a typical Midwestern house, probably, I'm guessing right now. I remember walking there. I'm like, why? I remember even as like a 3 or 4 year old kid. I'm like, what is this contrast? Why is it I don't want to leave this house? It feels so homey. It feels welcoming. It's nice. You go to most Asian houses in Asia, it's cold. There's no carpets. It's very minimalistic, but not like minimalistic because I'm trying to be minimalistic. Minimalistic because I just don't think about it,
Yeah.
And just like you go to a typical American house, especially in the Midwest. Yeah, there is a flavor of welcoming. There's a flavor of like
peace, tranquility.
Yes, just the decors and whatnot. And I remember just even as a young kid in that moment, I'm like, there is something different. What is this? Now, 40 years later, as I'm reading this book, I remember had that memory. I'm like, now I see the evident fruit of Western civ.
Wow.
And we were all Christians.
And those were ideas that were translated from a concept, a spiritual thing, into a physical thing.
Into the physical realm, which is what has true impact on nations and cultures and families and whatnot. It wasn't like I wasn't a Christian. We're all Christians, but the Western civ impact has profound influence beyond just in the local like church or missionary setting, into impact into all aspects of society that we have no clue of.
Wow.
So
no, that's the first time I've ever heard you share that.
I didn't remember until I was reading this book. I was like, I mean, that memory came to me. I was like, as a kid, I always wonder, what is the fundamental difference? I was considering big worldview questions at 3 years old.
No, absolutely. You didn't know the framework, but you could feel and experience something.
Absolutely. It was very different.
And now you understand some of the why. But that's why it's amazing when you go to different nations and you just look at like, why do they do what they do? Yeah. It all comes from a worldview. And you can clearly see differences in thinking, difference in how you live, what you tolerate, legal systems, governments, economic systems. All of these things flow out of their religion. That's why all of life is religious in nature. Every worldview is religious in nature. And then you begin to understand why. So you understand the redemptive gifts God has placed in different cultures based on their view of the world, and the ones that line up with His view are the ones that bring blessing anywhere that we go. So we can certainly learn from every culture, but cultures immersed in the Bible have even more to teach us about freedom and liberty and some of these things. So a little trivia question. He's talking about here ideas that have been instrumental in shaping nations or nation building. And this would be a great trivia question for those who are watching our podcast today. Next to the Bible, okay, so what is the Bible is the most translated, most printed book in the world. Bestseller. What is the number 2 all-time printed books, translated books in the entire world? I bet most people would know.
Never guess that, this book.
And it is the book, John Bunyan's book, Pilgrims' Progress. And again, Bunyan is an amazing guy to read and study. He spent a total of about 12 years in prison simply for being a nonconformist preacher. In other words, he was not he was not submitting to the code at the time, and yet he refused on the basis of conscience, like so many other reformers. He was a prisoner of truth. He was reading the Bible, and the conclusions he came to from the Bible made him be a prisoner of conscience. And so he didn't have to stay in prison. He could have renounced what he believed, and he could have gone along to get along.
Sure.
But he himself was influenced by the Bible and was a reformer and a nation builder. 12 years in prison. His Bible was translated, or his book, Pilgrim's Progress, translated into 200 languages. And, you look at who his character was in that book. It was a man carrying a heavy burden on his back, armed not with a weapon, but with a book, armed with the Bible. And he was on a journey to the celestial city.
Yeah.
And he was looking to get free from the sin and the temptations that we deal with as human beings. And that book, again, next to the Bible, that book formed the Puritan concept of the world. And as you pointed out, it was the Pilgrims who came to America looking for a place to practice their faith freely, looking for the New Jerusalem, looking for a city whose builder was God and who was formed and shaped by God, a city. And that was so much a part of the imagery, America being a city set on a hill. All of these ideas come from the Bible, these concepts, the phraseology, the language, the metaphors, the framework, all of this is biblically immersed. And so, again, Pilgrims coming to America, inspired by a man who wrote a book about the scriptures and about the reality and the worldview that comes from the Bible. So let's end with this, because I thought this was very depressing. Life or literature in the secular West. When literature is not shaped by Western ideals that are rooted in the Bible, so you have no God, you have no meaning, you have no morality, you have no purpose, you have basically nihilism. What do you have to write about that's inspiring? There's nothing that's inspiring. And so you get authors, these were authors who shaped much of the 60s revolution, like Jean-Paul Sartre, who wrote his work Nausea. Imagine writing a work that you call Nausea, right, because that's really captures the whole essence of the work.
Right.
Human existence to Sartre was ludicrous. So if life is ludicrous, everything is ludicrous, there is no meaning, then what you're going to write about will reflect that. And at the end of the day, like, who wants to read that? It's just depressing. Or somebody like Albert Camus, The Stranger, again, about just random acts of meaningless violence in a world that is ultimately meaningless itself. So you live for the moment. That's why we talk about, getting high, having random sexual encounters, alcohol, and getting a buzz. Whatever feels good, do it.
That really inspires young people to lay their life down for a cause, right?
Yeah. It's all about, at the end of the day, it's all about me and my momentary pleasure. Because life is meaningless. You're going to die. You'll cease to exist. Everybody just cares about themselves anyway. There are no absolutes. There's nothing really worth living for or dying for. Makes me wonder, even in our culture today, when you lose God and you lose the Bible, what happens in terms of military might and prowess? We certainly are technologically advanced, but we're spending most of our time in the military right now transgenderizing our military. Right, are you kidding me? We've got men that have become women paid for with American tax dollars, and what are you guys willing to fight for?
That's what's good. That's considered good.
Yeah.
Right.
So I just shudder to think, when you watch like Saving Private Ryan, who's going to storm the modern day beaches to fight these kind of battles when you've completely rotted out from the inside because you've lost the very foundation of what made Western civilization great, right, which is the Bible and the ideas contained in the Bible. He says here, maybe a good place to end, the Bible's impact on literature made it the West's source of cultural authority. A rejection of the Bible is resulting in moral and intellectual anarchy. And so this is what's happening in higher education today. We throw out the source of any absolute authority and objectivity. What we're left with is meaninglessness. And then we wonder why we're seeing a massive decline internally. It's not anybody outside threatening us. We are literally rotting from within with lawlessness, purposelessness, moral depravity, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, breakdown of the family. The list goes on and on and on. But it's because we've lost the source of our strength and our authority, which is the Scripture. So until we return to the Bible, until we return to a belief in truth with a capital T, not personal truth for everybody, I don't know if there's any hope of recovery. It's just a downward spiral into the abyss. But again, as Christians, we always know there's always a hope for recovery because that's what the Bible teaches.
Yeah, and my fear initially was when I read all this, it's like, well, there was the Dark Ages before, and there was the times before the Bible. And it's called chaos, and to me, it's like, it sounds like living hell, okay? And I'm afraid as we're rejecting all this biblical truth, we're going to wind back down again. But here's the difference, and here's where my hope is. My hope is in the Lord, but also just looking at history. Some ideas you can't erase.
Yep.
People have been trying to burn Bibles.
Yep.
You're literally burning Bibles, or you were just talking about somebody in Congress was trying to hide the Bible under some couch, or in our higher education, people try to intellectually erase biblical ideas. But now that the Bible has been democratized, you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
No, you're right.
So somehow the truth of the Bible will come out and win out. Even right now with I look at pop culture, some of the stories, some of the movies that really are gaining traction and popular, they're not overtly Christian or anything like that, but they contain things and ideas from the Bible.
Yeah.
And the movies that flopped are the movies that are, like, say, nihilistic, and there's about victimization and no one cares about.
Yep.
So there is a public longing and desire for truth. And I don't know with the woke infestations, I don't know if they can ever conquer that longing for truth.
It's part of what it means, I think, to be made in the image and likeness of God. Yeah. We know that there is hope, that we know that there has to be a God. We know that there has to be truth and justice. It's part of what's in the human heart. Yeah. I had a quote here from Corrie ten Boom, who of course lived through Hitler's Holocaust. She said, "I've experienced his presence in the deepest, darkest hell that men can create. I have tested the promises of the Bible, and believe me, you can count on them. I know that Jesus Christ can live in you, in me, through his Holy Spirit. You can talk with him. You can talk with him out loud or in your heart when you're alone, as I was alone in solitary confinement. The joy that he hears each word." And again, I love this. So here's someone that lived through, as you said, the deepest, darkest hell that most people have ever conceived of. And she said, you can count on the promises of the Bible and the presence of God to be with you in the darkest seasons of life. That really is our hope. And that's our hope for America. That's our hope for all of human history, is that people return to the God who gives hope. So what a great, some great thoughts today. And I guess we can't leave today without encouraging you, be people of the book. We have Bibles. Americans are blessed with truth. Read the Bible, study the Bible, immerse yourself in Scripture. Let it shape the way you think. And in doing so, you will experience the greatest human happiness you can possibly experience by being biblically saturated people. All right. Yeah. So we look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Thanks again for tuning in. Please give us some comments, feedback, like it, share it, spread the word. We appreciate you and appreciate your help in getting this podcast out. All right. See you next Thursday.